Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, August 17th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Biden defends the Afghan withdrawal. The Taliban declares amnesty, calls for women to join the government. Don't hold your breath. Congress may hold hearings on the tactical mistakes in that withdrawal and evacuations. Meanwhile, the Biden administration will call for COVID booster shots 8 months after your last jab. Washington, D.C. and New York State to impose vaccine mandates for healthcare workers. Colorado River water gets a federal shortage declaration for the first time ever. Georgia increases funding for hospitals. Texas requests 5 mobile mortuaries for anticipated COVID deaths. The governor of Louisiana says its healthcare system is near major failure. Haiti earthquake death toll now nears 1,500. Lastly, the U.S. to investigate Tesla's autopilot system apparently has a tendency to hit parked emergency vehicles on the highway. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Joining me, as always, Emma Vigland. Hello, Emma.
Hello, Sam.
Folks, no guest today. We're going to go over the news of the withdrawal and a couple other stories that are a little bit more positive. Want to start by playing this clip. This is an old clip, ladies and gentlemen. It is from 2001.
Mere days after 9/11.
In September of, I guess, I don't know if this was September 15th or what, but here is Congresswoman Barbara Lee. She's on the House floor. You'll recall the invasion of Afghanistan started less than a month after 9/11. I think it was the first week of October, if I remember correctly. And here's Barbara Lee. And it's important to know the context at this time. I mean, I experienced it only from New York City, so I don't know what the feeling was, outside of New York, really. But I can tell you, in New York City, people were in shock. I think probably around this time that she's on this speech, my building was evacuated because there was some reports that the Empire State Building was going to be hit. And had the Empire State Building been hit, there would have been, fallout all within, blocks and blocks of that. I lived, 10 blocks away from the Empire State Building. Washington, D.C., of course, was also a target. And
that's where Barbara Lee's speaking. So
right.
She has, it's not New York City, but she has some personal understanding of what, people were going through in the wake.
And I think, everybody internalized it in some fashion or another, but there's a lot of shock, then obviously a lot of anger. It's important to know the context to appreciate what kind of courage this took in that moment. Here is Barbara Lee.
Mr. Speaker, members, I rise today really with a very heavy heart, one that is filled with sorrow for the families and the loved ones who were killed and injured this week. Only the most foolish and the most callous would not understand the grief that has really gripped our people and millions across the world. This unspeakable act on the United States has really forced me, however, to rely on my moral compass, my conscience, and my God for direction. September 11th changed the world. Our deepest fears now haunt us. However difficult this vote may be, some of us must urge the use of restraint. Our country is in a state of mourning. Some of us must say, let's step back for a moment. Let's just pause just for a minute and think through the implications of our actions today so that this does not spiral out of control.
Few did, particularly in the context of Afghanistan.
Well, she was the lone vote against the authorization of use of military force. Her voice shaking, as you say, the courage that took, as the fury and the pain was boiling over, and of course the already existing power structures at the Pentagon were chomping at the bit. I don't think that can be overstated.
Yeah, and it was an intense time. Took a lot of bravery for her to do that, and then we've had 20 years, and we're going to talk more about the Afghanistan. We'll go over Biden's speech, but we've had 20 years, and really, there does not seem to have been at any point a long-term strategy or purpose for our presence there. And it was quite evident after the release of the Afghanistan papers that there was not even an attempt, it appears, and the decisiveness of the fall of the Afghan government, I think makes it clear that to the extent that there was some pretense that we were attempting to stand up the Afghan government and train them and build institutions and train the military to function on their own, was, even if that was the pretense, it was clearly not handled that way by our military and everyone else.
Do you remember the resignation of Matthew Ho in 2009? Because I didn't until I was going through Michael Hastings' book. But in 2009, he resigned, and it made the Washington Post. But here's a bit from his resignation. To put simply, I fail to see the value or the worth in continued U.S. casualties or expenditures of resources in support of the Afghan government in what is truly a 35-year-old civil war. I mean, the exact same thing is, we don't have a purpose here. What are we doing? I'm going to resign because I don't see what the point is.
Absolutely. And, a broad failure, even during the Trump administration. I would imagine it's going to come to a surprise for many people that 2018 and 2019 were the worst year for casualties, civilian casualties, since 2002.
Tell that to John Cornyn.
And
who was trying to say that under Trump there was very few casualties in Afghanistan.
2018, 2019 were record-breaking years in the 18 years prior, both in terms of the number of bombs and the number of civilians that we killed. And it was, Trump trying to, I don't know, end the war, I guess, by creating some type of vacuum and distance between the inevitable failure of the Afghanistan government and his exit, if he was going to do that. We'll talk more about this on the other side as we go through Joe Biden's speech. Going to take a quick break. We'll be right back in just a moment. Folks, no ads today. Just a reminder, you can support this show by becoming a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. And you can also sign up for the AM Quickie newsletter, which you can find at majority.fm. So check it out. All right. We're back. Let's play this clip. Joe Biden came out, and look, in a million years, you can't imagine that the Biden administration wanted the scenes that they saw over the weekend. And there is a tactical failure, to say the least. First off, there should have been months ago more willingness and plans to evacuate refugees from Afghanistan. But they were afraid to do so because they're afraid that, I don't know, Tucker Carlson or Laura Ingraham is going to say, how can you let in all these refugees? I mean, that's just the bottom line.
The Charlie Kirk veto.
Exactly. Or maybe they just don't care. I don't know which one it is. But it's clear there was a massive, purposeful failure there. And then there was obviously a tactical failure of these days. But the reality, and I think Joe Biden admits it, the reality is this was always going to happen. Months ago, when Joe Biden announced it, I, sitting in Brooklyn, who has never come anywhere close to Afghanistan, knew that it was going to happen. It's just a question of when. I don't think anybody anticipated that it would happen, simultaneous with the last airplane that leaves. But and maybe it was going to take a week. Maybe it was going to take 2 weeks, a month, or 3 months, 5 months. But it was going to happen.
Well, of course, the Biden administration, I think, probably underestimated, as does the entire press, the efficacy of the United States occupation there. I mean, essentially, you read these pieces about how the Afghan troops were being funded almost entirely by Pentagon dollars, and then they'd go to ghost soldiers and disappear, and the money wouldn't go anywhere. I mean, we were seen as rubes, as an occupying force that wasn't a benevolent white knight brigade in Afghanistan, but that's the notion that predicates much of how the press frames this. And of course, Biden's not immune to the American exceptionalist view, or Blinken, whoever is on his team. It's a big through line for them.
All right, let's hear Joe Biden's first segment of the speech.
We went to Afghanistan almost 20 years ago with clear goals. Get those who attacked us on September 11th, 2001, and make sure al-Qaeda could not use Afghanistan as a base from which to attack us again. We did that. We severely degraded al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. We never gave up the hunt for Osama bin Laden, and we got him. That was a decade ago. Our mission in Afghanistan was never supposed to have been nation building. It was never supposed to be creating a unified, centralized democracy. Our only vital national interest in Afghanistan remains today what it has always been: preventing a terrorist attack on America's homeland. I've argued for many years that our mission should be narrowly focused on counterterrorism, not counterinsurgency or nation building. That's why I opposed the surge when it was proposed in 2009 when I was vice president. And that's why, as president, I'm adamant that we focus on the threats we face today in 2021, not yesterday's threats.
I mean, the reality is that, to the extent that we have documentation from that time, he was against it. He was against the surge. He probably had more insight than anyone else in the White House as to the failures that were going on there, the failure to build any of the institutions. Everybody knew after 2004 that the Bush administration had pulled everything out of Afghanistan and was in basically just a holding pattern.
All to Iraq.
All to Iraq. And they had failed at Tora Bora to get bin Laden, which, who knows why that was the case? It was probably incompetence. Incompetence more often than not describes all of this. But there may have also been less relevance. At one point, Bush said, I'm not worried about Osama bin Laden in 2006 or whatnot. And he may have been no reason to be concerned about bin Laden at that point. But in 2002, when you had an opportunity to catch bin Laden, like I say, probably incompetence, but very convenient if you want to maintain the sense that we as a country are on war footing with terrorism, with a tactic. Because if bin Laden is in jail or has been assassinated by us, it becomes a lot harder to justify.
Well, the wheels were already churning, Sam. I mean, the machine was already kicking itself into high gear, so they couldn't.
You mean in terms of Iraq?
Yeah.
Oh well, that started almost contemporaneously with Barbara Lee's speech. I mean, the moment we know from Richard Clarke, the moment that the planes hit the tower. I mean, Rumsfeld on September 11th was like, "Get me everything you can to show that Iraq did this."
Yeah, we haven't.
And they're like,
"Finish the job."
We don't. What are you talking about? They didn't do this. Yeah. Well, get me everything you have to say that they did do this. And that was the agenda there. But in terms of what you're selling to the American public, and you want to pursue another country that had. And you're pulling out the stops to convince people, the idea that bin Laden's still at large was a helpful, even if reasonable people knew that there was no relationship between bin Laden and Iraq, the idea that he was still out there still maintained this sort of like threat fervor.
The big boss hadn't been brought to justice yet. And we should also say Biden was eager to go to Iraq as well.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. I mean, who knows what was in their heart of hearts, but but Biden legitimately did advocate against the surge to the extent that one as vice president can.
Yeah, if you look in Michael Hastings, The Operators, compared to like Hillary Clinton, who was very pro sending more troops to Afghanistan, Biden was skeptical of it.
All right, let's play the next clip.
When I came into office, I inherited a deal that President Trump negotiated with the Taliban. Under his agreement, U.S. forces would be out of Afghanistan by May 1, 2021, just a little over 3 months after I took office. U.S. forces had already drawn down during the Trump administration from roughly 15,500 American forces to 2,500 troops in country. And the Taliban was at its strongest militarily since 2001. The choice I had to make as your president was either to follow through on that agreement or be prepared to go back to fighting the Taliban in the middle of the spring fighting season. There would have been no ceasefire after May 1. There was no agreement protecting our forces after May 1. There was no status quo of stability without American casualties after May 1. There was only a cold reality of either following through on the agreement to withdraw our forces or escalating the conflict and sending thousands more American troops back into combat in Afghanistan, lurching into the third decade of conflict. I stand squarely behind my decision. After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there was never a good time to withdraw U.S. forces. That's why we're still there.
I appreciate the strength in that. I mean, there are quibbles I have with the speech in general, like, one, the emphasis on American troops, not really discussion about the civilians and casualties in Afghanistan. It's a political decision, but I think long term, if you're on the party that's ostensibly on the left, you've got to emphasize casualties in the nation that you're occupying. And then the other is that he goes on to blame, not in his words, but essentially cowardice of the Afghani government and troops there, which I don't appreciate. But overall, the fact that he did not back down as the cavalcade of media just comes down on him for this decision, and he basically stood firm in it. What can you say? I mean, it was the right move.
Yeah, I don't know what choice he has. I mean, at this point, you can't reverse yourself. I mean, but the reality is that it's been a crap show, that the U.S. military did not prepare the Afghani military to in any way exist without the support of the United States and contractors. They built a military that required air power. The Afghans have no air power. They built a military that required contractors to show them how to operate machinery, how to perform tactics. They had 20 years. And they really did sort of the parody of what all conservatives argue is a problem with government, which is they created a fighting force that was a supplement to what the United States provided it, as opposed to one that could actually stand on its own.
Self-sustaining.
And it's self-sustaining.
Just had them on the take from the Pentagon, as opposed to...
But it's not just a question of a take. It's a question of actually the way that you train them. Do you train them to function, to work with the United States military and contractors? Or do you train them to function on their own? You could provide funding. You could always provide funding. But the military, in a way, created an entity that needed the U.S. military to exist. And so, therefore, the U.S. military was basically ensuring a market for itself in the future, or at least trying to. And then the other issue that I think gets lost in a lot of this, and also lost with the 2019 bombing, is the folks who lived outside of Kabul, the majority of Afghanis, we're in the midst of this constant civil war, and we're tired of it. And even if the Afghani army could have stood up on its own, there was just not enough support by the Afghan people to deal with a civil war between the Taliban and the Afghani National Army, to the extent that there was one. And I think that was, I think that is something that is underestimated broadly in our press, is that...
Well, what is underlying that underestimation?
Well, I think there's a lot of different things from it. I mean, I think one is sort of just, all of the sort of the patriotism and the sort of the notion that we're in the right. But I think also part of it is also just, the same dynamic of I'm reporting from Kabul, And in Kabul, it's a different sort of life is different than it is out in the countryside.
In rural Afghanistan. I think like the underlying assumption that American troops there are a benevolent presence, or one that isn't like met by scorn, or at the very least kind of just reluctant acceptance by the Afghani people. I mean, like that blows people's minds in the press when you're talking about it. And they're also telling on themselves too when they talk about these images that we're seeing out of the airport in Kabul and around the country, because for 20 years there has been bloodshed and there has been violence. And under the Bush administration, they weren't publishing a lot of these images to not hurt the war effort. But even in the Obama years and in the Trump years, there were still horrific images coming out of Afghanistan. And only do they care about the violent imagery now when it contradicts American hegemony. Okay. And in a way to justify the occupation. And now we're up in arms. Like, it also has to do with the fact that these newsrooms have completely gutted their, for the most part, international reporting arms. So they really have very little understanding of what's happening there. I'm not an expert, but, you know, that's another wrinkle to the story, too.
Worth following Azmat Khan, who was reporting, you know, out in the rural parts of Afghanistan for this perspective on basically just people retiring. It's not even, you don't even have to dislike the U.S. forces. You can just dislike the idea of like there being a war and being in the middle of it and realizing that like the Taliban's not going anywhere. Like they had the advantage they had is that this is their homeland and they have nowhere else to go. And they can just wait, which is basically what they did. Let's play this clip number 3.
What's happening now could just as easily happen 5 years ago or 15 years in the future. You have to be honest. Our mission in Afghanistan is taking many missteps, made many missteps over the past 2 decades. I'm now the 4th American president to preside over war in Afghanistan. 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. I will not pass this responsibility on to a 5th president. I will not mislead the American people by claiming that just a little more time in Afghanistan will make all the difference. Nor will I shrink from my share of responsibility for where we are today and how we must move forward from here. I am President of the United States of America, and the buck stops with me. I'm deeply saddened by the facts we now face, but I do not regret my decision to end America's warfighting in Afghanistan and maintain a laser focus on our counterterrorism missions there and other parts of the world. Our mission to degrade the terrorist threat of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and kill Osama bin Laden was a success. Our decades-long effort to overcome centuries of history and permanently change and remake Afghanistan was not, and I wrote and believed it never could be. I cannot and will not ask our troops to fight on endlessly in another country's civil war, taking casualties, suffering life-shattering injuries, leaving families broken by grief and loss. This is not in our national security interest. It is not what the American people want. It is not what our troops, who have sacrificed so much over the past 2 decades, deserve. I made a commitment to the American people when I ran for president that I would bring America's military involvement in Afghanistan to an end. While it's been hard and messy, and yes, far from perfect, I've honored that commitment.
A couple of things. One, he's absolutely right that it was sheer cowardice by his predecessors not to end this war. It was cowardice by Obama There was cowardice by Bush. It was cowardice by Trump setting that date 4 months after he's going to be into his second term. Who knows what would have happened?
Right.
I mean, who knows how he would have responded to the recrimination from the scenes of at the Kabul airport.
Oh, man.
Oh, I just don't know if we would have gotten to that point. I think we could have gotten into May and he would have been like, okay, whatever. I thought this was going to be a selling point. Now just drop another mother of all, bombs on them.
Yeah, we'll do it March 2025.
Or maybe he would have pulled out. We don't know.
He could have made some sort of like Tucker Carlson, they're just, primitive people argument in order to justify it. But regardless, the point is he didn't do it. He didn't do it in his first term. He didn't do it. He could have done it in 2019. He could have done it in 2020. He could have done it at any time. He didn't do it. And Biden deserves credit for that. At one point in the speech, he says, we didn't think it would happen this fast. So they knew this was going to happen. Mm-hmm. And the only thing ultimately, let's be honest, that they really were concerned with is how can we create the temporal distance between our leaving and this happening. That's what we need to do. We don't want it to be, when they were talking about a Vietnam moment or a Saigon moment, we just don't want it to be so obvious that we were propping up this government and this society for so long in such a poor fashion that we never, ever let it grow into a thing that could even sustain itself for a day after we leave. And so they wanted to maintain that temporal distance. That's the only thing that they care about. But the failure of Biden here, in my estimation, and, I would be shocked if we have that clip. Yeah, play that clip, just because I want it to be really clear that they knew this was going to happen. It's just they thought they would have a couple of weeks. Well, that's why, just really quickly, he says, he basically talks about the failures of the presidents before him. By the way, no Obama BFF memes right there, is because he understands from behind the scenes that they were grappling with that very question about the optics of leaving more than anything in many respects.
And Obama ran on a surge in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
He was running against Iraq by saying that it took our eye off the ball in Afghanistan, which was true. But again, it's like you can't go backwards in time. And the moment of where you had an opportunity, if that's what you wanted, to disempower the Taliban had passed. And it was even the surge of whatever it was, 100,000 troops in 2009 or 2010, I think was one of our peaks in terms of deployment, was not going to be enough. Play that last clip of Biden.
We were clear-eyed about the risks. We planned for every contingency, but I always promised the American people that I would be straight with you. The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed, sometime without trying to fight.
All right, pause. I don't need to hear the recriminations on the Afghan people who didn't perform as the way that we wanted to, while we were occupying them.
Yeah, that's the most vile part of what he said.
But that part about this happened more quickly than we anticipated. In other words, this was inevitable.
Yeah.
And if you know it's inevitable, right? Like if Joe Biden knows it's inevitable and all the advisors know it's inevitable, the guy in Afghanistan that Joe Biden is relying on, slowing the roll of the Taliban, that guy knows it's inevitable too. And he decided, you know what? I'm not going to stay here and fight so that Joe Biden has the opportunity to say, like, look, it didn't happen for 6 months. Like, I'm going to go now. I can see the writing on the wall. I mean, so for all those people who said, I'm not going to fight, the Afghanis who said, I'm not going to fight or I'm going to walk away, it's because they knew it was inevitable too. Mm-hmm. Because they did nothing was done by the United States over the course of those 20 years to alter that dynamic fundamentally, to create any type of civil society. And maybe you couldn't do it. My guess is you probably couldn't. But that's an argument as to why we should have left. And the biggest failure, it seems to me, of Biden in this speech, and for the most part, he's being straightforward and then, putting out this sort of pablum like, we shouldn't be in that civil war if they don't want us, if they're not willing to fight for themselves. Well, maybe they're just tired of being bombed. But the bigger failure of Biden here is to make a more comprehensive argument about American invasion and occupation of countries and military intervention. Because we keep getting example after example of how it fails by any measure, whether it's U.S. national security interests or just sheer humanity. And the cowardice that he bemoans about his predecessors to not get out when it was clear that it was wrong is also the cowardice that he's exhibiting by not saying, this whole concept that we have the ability to do these things in a way where there's a positive outcome, that concept is also wrong.
It's not cowardice on his part, though, because I still think he believes in that fundamentally.
He might, but then it's just sheer ignorance because he's staring right into, he's seen two examples of it.
We've had Jeremy Scahill on to talk about Biden as the empire politician. This is a part of his politics, his identity. So within the confines of Biden and who he is, who we know him to be, this was a surprisingly strong speech. But that is the failure, right? Not something I'm going to expect from him to have an anti-imperialist view where we're actually looking at American empire in a critical way. I mean, look at how he framed it there. It's all about American troops' lives. It's all about the cowardice of the Afghani people, as opposed to just no one wants to die when there's nothing to die for. It's a lost cause here. That's exactly what it was, as you said.
I think he could even still maintain his perspective without
you're coming at it from your perspective.
Yes, I appreciate what you're saying, but I'm saying that he can, I think, even maintain his imperial aspirations, but find a different way. If his aspirations are such, it doesn't help those aspirations to keep failing at these empires. I mean, really, the only these imperial expeditions. The only the only upshot here is to a couple of weapons manufacturers, stock baseline prices. I mean, that's basically it. There's been no value to even the imperial ambitions.
Don't forget about mercenaries getting rich. Eric Prince, that was a success for him.
Jay or Blackwater, yes, indeed. All right, and I mean, I think that's I don't know what else to say.
I should also say that up until this point, there were many Afghan soldiers that died, and I thought that was particularly insulting to the Afghan soldiers and civilians who also died in this 20-year war. So, it's politically expedient for him to blame them and use that to deflect. And we're already seeing in the media that he's trying to pawn it off onto being Trump's plan to some degree. But yes, for the most part, I'm happy he owned it. However, I did find that to be quite vile, even though most of what he said was surprisingly good with his history.
I just want to read this segment of a piece by Laura Jadid. Not quite sure. She served in Afghanistan. She's a writer and a videographer. I'm not quite sure where you can find her stuff, but she has a Medium, I think it is. JEDEED. And she talks about it. This just really stuck out with me in terms of, from the perspective of a U.S. military person, as to, you know, sort of just the absolute quagmire, I guess you could say. She writes, I remember finding propaganda footage cut together from the Soviet invasion and our own Operation Enduring Whatever. I remember laughing at how stupid the Afghans were to not know that we weren't Russians, and then eventually realizing I was the stupid one. I remember how every year the U.S. would have to decide how to deal with the opium fields. There were a few options. You could leave the fields alone, and then the Taliban would shake the farmers down and use the money to buy weapons. Or you could carpet bomb the fields, and then the farmers would join the Taliban for reasons that, to me, seem obvious. The third option, and the one we went for a while while I was there, was to give the farmers fertilizer as an incentive to grow wheat instead of opium poppy. The farmers then sold the fertilizer to the Taliban, who used it to make explosives for IEDs that could destroy $1 million MRAP and maim everyone inside. I remember we weren't allowed to throw batteries away because the people who worked on base would go through the trash and collect hundreds of dead batteries, wire them together so they had just enough juice for one charge, and use that charge to detonate an IED. I mean, the idea that there is, like, I mean, that to me is, like, you know, probably the best sort of like encapsulation of at least the futility of whatever it is that we were supposedly going to do over there, you know, regardless of what set of ambitions anybody had as to whether they were going to build a society or, I don't know, conquer the Afghani people, whatever it was. And this is, you know, as futile as that sounds, you know, the dismal part is on the other end of things for the Afghani people.
Yeah, you say the word ambition, and I think, you know, there's a lot of time that's going to be spent on blaming the political leaders that led us here, and I think that's all worthwhile. I think the military needs an awful lot of attention too, and the way that just the complete anti-democratic monstrosity it became, like just matter-of-factly saying we co-opted the media in the run-up to Iraq and that time, like that's just part of that's their business, right? It's their job to do that. It's their job to tell a new president that, like, give them only a limited number of options, which are all like increasing their footprint in a certain place like that. Like our military is completely out of control, and I think like that, like the ambition is different guys like Petraeus or McChrystal or the Flynns, right? Like their ambition gets just scars an entire country.
I mean that's right. You know, it's just a really horrible corporation, and with you know, the exact same sort of, you know, but the same dynamics, where, you know, there is some semblance of like a broad sense of survival for the corporation is important so that I can move up in that corporation. But beyond that, that's it. And so the survival of the corporation is also a function of what's going to be in the best interest of my ascendancy within that corporation. And so every decision that follows becomes that. We're going to train these people in a way so that they need me. And
yeah, exactly.
And that's and you know that
but by the way, too, speaking of like those arms we gave to the Afghan troops without really, you know, training them to be self-sufficient with it, those are in the Taliban's hands now.
Yeah.
Just so you guys know. I mean,
yeah, they took a lot of stuff. It's unclear like how much of it they'll be able to use. They'll be able to learn some of it. You know, there's no reason to believe that they're going to be able to use too much of it, unless, of course, that they end up finding the people who were trained on them in the first place.
But way to, kind of bookend. Well, it's probably not over.
You don't want to bring that back.
At least in theory, though, right? We gave our arms to the Mujahideen, and now indirectly we've given them back.
Right. Well, you don't want to bring those back because then you wouldn't be able to buy any new ones.
That's true. They're just mysteriously gone.
It's like any other corporation, right? You spend, your department. If you don't spend all of your budget at the end of the Q4, you're going to get it's going to get rolled back in the following fiscal year. So you got to get all that stuff out the door.
Well, now it's like what we did under Bush during the Gulf War, right? We can sell to both sides.
Exactly.
We can sell to the Afghan. Well, no, it's taken over by the Taliban, but whenever the next other side emerges.
Let's go through a couple of the way the media is handling this. Sort of gotten some. Here's Nicolle Wallace, who was George Bush's communications director on MSNBC. Certainly spent some time messaging that war. Here is her response to Biden's speech, and let's hear it.
95% of the American people will agree with everything he just said. 95% of the press covering this White House will disagree. And for an American president to finally be completely aligned with such an overwhelming majority of what the American people think about Afghanistan is probably a tremendous relief to the American people.
Great take.
Well, I think that's. I do think that is. I think that's true. I think I'd like there to be a little bit more like reflection on the other part of that calculation that she made, which I think she's right.
She's just she's passively analyzing it. You're right.
But I think she's right about the 95% of the press will have an issue of it, and I think that we should maybe stop and marinate on that a little bit.
With the objective press.
Well, what she's saying there in terms of the White House press, why is that? Why isn't the next week or two of shows focused on the idea that the American public wants out, the president of the United States wants out, but 95% of the press covering the White House have an issue with that? That to me seems like, we should have a couple of specials.
Yeah, maybe that explains how we got into these sort of mess.
Exactly.
Maybe it's an indictment on how cable news in particular has covered wars of American empire since the origin of 24-hour cable news, or even
it's not just cable news.
Vietnam. Yeah.
Where's Judith Butler?
Miller.
Miller, sorry.
But it's the Times broadly, the Post. All of the major newspapers were completely in lockstep.
Even like the New Republic and those sorts of places.
Oh well, the New Republic at that time was not the place to be citing. Believe me. But that's a good point. But it's not just. That's something like we might want to take a break from regular scheduled programming and spend some time to figure out what the implications are, where you could have 95%, and I think she's right, 95% of the White House press take an issue with this.
But you know what the conclusion of that is likely for a lot of members of the press is, well, it's just because we know what's going on.
Right. We're a little more savvy, except for all the parts that are actually involved with this.
Except for the facts of how often we've been wrong and yet still arrogant.
It's hard to look
our coverage.
It's hard to look savvy in the shadow of those images from the Kabul airport.
Yeah, indeed. Well, no, but it was just like.
But it's Biden's fault.
But the way that's it.
Yeah.
That's it, right? That's exactly it. The savvy is that he screwed up. This shouldn't have happened while we were all looking. This is supposed to happen weeks and months from now. And that's what Biden's plan was too. That's what we admit. We didn't anticipate this happening so quickly.
Well, good on them for finally deciding to show some footage from Afghanistan, right?
Indeed. Here's Tucker Carlson responding, as you knew Tucker Carlson would, to what we saw in Afghanistan this weekend. And I guess the only surprise is that he didn't say it was a function of black people. But here's Tucker Carlson.
But first, since Kabul has just fallen, it might be worth asking the most obvious question of all. Why did the Taliban win? How did the 6th century triumph over the 21st century? There are indications that the single most notorious and reviled government in the world, primitive people famous for their brutality, rigidity, and humorlessness, are more popular in parts of Afghanistan than they were when we expelled the mullahs from Kandahar 20 years ago. They don't seem to be less popular. So how did that happen? What's the answer? We ought to pause to think about that. Let's not just blow past it like it was an act of God.
Pause it for a second. I want you to think it. Pause it. I want you, as the audience, to think about what could be the answer. Could it be the bombings? Could it be the slaughter of civilians?
Widespread torture, prisoner abuse.
Torture, yes. We're going to pay people to hand in their neighbors and torture them. Could it be the occupation? Could it be any of those things? Anybody? No, you're wrong. You're wrong. Could it be the release of 5,000 Taliban prisoners, 8 months ago under Trump, that like people are like, oh, no, you're not sending these guys back at us. Continue.
We ought to pause to think about that. Let's not just blow past it like it was an act of God. It's not. What is the answer? Well, countries are very complicated, all of them, so there are likely many answers. But one of those answers may be that the population of Afghanistan has firmly rejected what our leaders were selling it over 20 years. It turns out that the people of Afghanistan don't actually want gender studies symposia. They didn't actually buy the idea that men can become pregnant. They thought that was ridiculous. They don't hate their own masculinity. They don't think it's toxic. They like the patriarchy.
I thought we were the ones operating in the 21st century, and they were in the 6th century.
Well, that's the point, that we're imposing upon them things like.
So well,
modernity is bad,
right? That's what
when
I'm
it
saying.
actually means that women have rights, but it's good when it comes to killing machines.
Amish Tucker Carlson.
All right, keep going here.
Masculinity. They don't think it's toxic. They like the patriarchy. Some of their women like it too. So now they're getting it all back.
Jealous.
So maybe it's possible that we failed in Afghanistan because the entire neoliberal program is grotesque. It's a joke. It's contrary to human nature. It answers none of our deepest human desires. It is merely a performance staged for the performer. It's not even supposed to improve
anymore of
your
this.
life.
You gave away the ghost. Listen, it wasn't the occupation. It wasn't the killing. It wasn't the drones. It wasn't the bombings.
It wasn't the killing of your uncle at your wedding or your neighbor or
We're
the
gonna pay
maiming of your
people
grandma.
to torture them at Bagram Air Base. No, it wasn't any of that. It was the billions of dollars we must have spent on the gender studies programs that we spent there.
Which is called neoliberalism
Yeah, I was just
somehow.
I was just gonna say like Milton Friedman, saying like we need to like introduce they them to people. Like, what are you talking about?
No,
That's
he's just
neoliberalism.
throwing in a bunch of terms, and the idea, like
elites.
the of the $1 trillion that we spent there, I have no doubt that there is several hundreds of dollars that were spent on gender studies
and gender neutral
in Kabul. And yeah, exactly. But I would be willing to wager just about everything I own that your average Afghani would have looked at you if you said, like, do you feel oppressed by the idea that we're pushing this concept of toxic masculinity on you? And they would just look at you like, are you out of your mind? All right, we got to take a quick break. We'll be right back and wrap this up. And that is really impressive stuff. That it's the reason why they were so excited for the Taliban to come back in is they don't want their children to they don't want their girls to go to school.
Well, yeah. Segment tonight is how is he going to shoehorn critical race theory into this?
That's right. CRT, because we were pushing that being taught in kindergarten, apparently.
And also, I mean, I thought the Taliban, I mean, the whole subjugation of women, isn't that something that he's against? But now he's saying that it's a natural response to women and gender studies. We all know it's a little more aligned with him than he thinks.
When you let him stay in the kitchen, you're really making them reach their own potential. That's it. We got to sign off for our Peacock viewers. We will see you tomorrow. And for the rest of you, sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Just want to say, there's a story, 2015. I don't know if this is what Tucker means, but U.S. soldiers told to ignore sexual abuse of boys by Afghan allies. That's not what I understand CRT to be about, but.
That's right. You're pushing that whole notion. I mean, look, that's what the Taliban will take like young boys as well. True. I mean, it is. They're horrible, but I think for many people in the countryside, it's like, you know what? They're not going to deal with us. Every now and then, maybe they'll come around, but for the most part, we just live our lives and we don't get bombed.
Also, he has no understanding of how extremism breeds. Like, the conditions we've created make extremism sound pretty much like a better alternative for a lot of people if it's that, active.
Well, it's a literal process of brutalization. Like, this is a place that's been at war for decades and decades and decades.
And I think it's just survival.
Yeah.
I think it's just you go with whoever's the biggest, kid on the block at that moment. And if I can sell, fertilizer to them, I'll sell fertilizer to them. They're going to use it as an EID. I mean,
and from
IUD.
a political perspective, they're selling strength and like self-actualization or some brand of nationalism or whatever. That's probably not the right word for it, but.
All right. Well, we got more clips on this, and I got other stories I wanted to talk about today. We'll do the food stamps and, well, let me just do this right now. We'll put this in the fun app just so we have some good news for people. I mean, it's not great news, but it's somewhat encouraging. So, as you know, there was an increase in, well, as you may not know, in SNAP benefits. This is basically food stamps. About 42 million people in this country getting some nutrition support, very anemic. Before the pandemic, $121 a person per month on the top end. There was a bump during COVID, my understanding. But that is set to expire in September. And so the USDA, which, because of arcane rules dealing with agriculture, administers the SNAP program, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, I think it is, announced new rules yesterday that will be put in place starting October, basically recalculating, both because of the increase in food costs, but also recalculating what it means essentially to be hungry, imposing a new nutritional standard. It was a study by the government that found apparently in June that 88% of SNAP recipients were struggling to achieve a healthy diet. They're going to raise benefits by more than 25% from those pre-pandemic levels. These piddling amounts of money we're talking about, but 25% is 25%. It's going to rise by $36, going from $121 before the pandemic to $157 starting in October. But supposedly this is going to at least reduce hunger, maybe extreme hunger. So this is good news. It is the largest increase in SNAP benefits in 50 years. And, we shouldn't have to have food stamps in this country. But we do. And at least in terms of what Biden can do, in terms of like unilaterally, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
So.
And I think in keeping with some of the anti-poverty tweaks he's been pushing, so it's not out of the blue, I guess.
No, it's going to have significant effects. Like, I can't find the think tank that made a sort of county by county breakdown of what this is going to mean. But like just in terms of like bringing people over a hump nationally, I think this is going to be massively beneficial, and it should have been done a long time ago.
Yep. But that's good news, and it's going to go under the radar, and which is probably good. At least insofar as it's good for the prospects of passing the budget reconciliation bill. We're going to talk more about that when we get Nomi here and go into the fun half.
But isn't it interesting, though, that, I mean, like, I don't even know if Republicans are going to come out and oppose this in any meaningful way, as you say, because I really think the pandemic laid bare how many people really unfortunately need assistance in this country. It's like toxic.
It's going to be interesting because for a long time you heard like, one of the rights during Obama was like 42 million people on food stamps. Right. And this is, America's failing, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be fascinating to see if this ends up being like if the right even picks it up, or if it's just going to be, the real problem is critical race theory. I mean, that is why it's a very highly advantageous time for these type of moves, because the right just doesn't seem to be paying attention, and so you're not getting any you're not paying any type of political price. Although I don't frankly think you would pay a political price, but they're not afraid.
At least with their conventional wisdom.
Nomi.
Hi.
How are you? Look at that. You get a different background every time we see you.
Every time.
Purple is the consistent.
I do like the purple.
Yeah. I want one of those if I end up, having to do some interview from my apartment. Just it's cool.
I have two, Emma, and I realized I only need one. So my gift to you.
In the States, I'll pick it up.
There you go.
Thank you.
My grandma's favorite color is her bathroom.
Your grandma's favorite color? Thanks. That's a real.
Well, I think it looks very neon and new behind you, but my grandma's bathroom is entirely that color.
Entirely that.
Similarly neon.
Nomi, promo your show for the week.
Yeah. So as everybody knows, we've shifted our show to 2 times a week. We're doing 2-hour chunks, Wednesday and Friday, and it's in the evening. So it's 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, if I can do the math right. We have a really cool show. On Fridays, we do it's Femme Fridays. So it's focused around women. We have women, or everybody who identifies as women, all women come on the show to talk about intersectional feminism and class issues related to, feminism and misogyny and et cetera, et cetera. But it does really well. And I love it because the audience is majority male, which is good stuff. Yeah.
And of course, I don't know if you're aware, but that is also pushing that kind of stuff is why the Taliban won. So.
Yeah. I actually read that from our friends over at Fox News. So
that's what Tucker Carlson
literally what Tucker Carlson said last night. He didn't go with critical race theory this time. He went with gender studies is why our effort failed.
Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leckian universe of media?
Harvey K coming up on Wednesday. We're going to be talking about Biden's failures mainly. Might talk a little bit about his upcoming British Marxist Historians book, but we'll also have him back on to talk about that. And I might talk to him about Thomas Paine as well. So that's 8 Eastern. Also, we talked to Natalie Scher for patrons this weekend. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning to hear us talk about vaccines and Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein.
All right, let's take a quick break. Don't forget, your support is what makes this show possible. Become a member, jointhemajority.com. Don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100.
Can't knock the hustle.
Come on, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back, ladies and gentlemen. It is the fun half. Nomi is joining us. 100 flowers blooming. I am Hey Sam and MR Crew. Can I please get a shofar from my partner who just completed their conversion to Judaism at a local mikvah? They chose the name Honi Simcha. Love you all. Left is best. All right.
Congrats.
That's a hard thing to accomplish.
Yeah, you got to ask like 3 times, I think it is.
I know that from Sex and
the City. I love it how we both look at it like.
I know, yeah. I've never known anyone that's converted.
Pilot season reference. The do your own research anti-vax talking point really lines up with the libertarian you should be an expert in everything talking point. Should we do the Brett Weinstein thing now?
If you want to.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, really, what that does to your own research is go into the propaganda channels that we can, further brainwash you in.
Yeah, exactly. You've got a phone. You know that you're aware that you're in the internet. If it's on the internet, it's got to be true. It is amazing to me to watch. Like, it's one thing, you're an individual and you're vaccine skeptical, but it's another to sort of be somebody who has no expertise in this, no real data, and then go on and encourage people to be skeptical of the vaccine, particularly at this stage.
Well, before we got vaccinated, we were incredibly pro-vaccine, but also very cautious about what we said. Even so.
Of course.
Basic responsibility.
Because we feel a responsibility to our audience.
Exactly. Here is
lawyers.
This is a video of about a man, Leslie Lawrenson, who died of COVID on August 6th. And he posted a video on Facebook of him stating, this is before he died, right? When was this video posted?
This is, I think, when he had the symptoms.
Okay, he posted this on July 28th. He died 8 days later. Here he is.
I've got a very high temperature. Some pain, some shivers, cold in my extremities. It feels exactly like a cold, maybe a little bit worse. When I stand up, I feel like I'm going to fall over. I can't remember if I've ever had that. Never have had a cold before. I hope I've got it. I hope it is COVID. Because I'd rather have the antibodies in my blood than take the jabs. Anyone who knows my opinion, anyone who has followed my comments on my Facebook page knows what I feel about the jab. So this is an update on the vlog that I made yesterday. I've already posted on Facebook that last night was pretty dreadful. The symptoms that I had at 11:30 had massively ramped up. I don't know how long, probably about 6 hours I spent in a fetal position, trying to block out the pain. It was every part of my body was racked with the pain. If these are things that we have to suffer, it's part of living. You have to trust your immune system, and if the alternative is that we live in fear, that we create a bogeyman out of something that hopefully I'm showing isn't anything to be afraid of for 99.9% of us, we've got to deal with that, and we've got to make the government aware that that is how we feel. People get flu, people get colds, people endure it and then get on with their lives. That's the way it's always been. COVID-19, in my view, and from what I've experienced so far, is nothing different. But the dangers of potential dangers from taking the experimental jab, for me, are not worth that risk. I'd rather take my chances with
my immune system. All right, a couple of things. I just want to make it clear, this is not to piss on this guy. There's a couple of things that are really important about this. One is he wanted to do this as a teaching mechanism.
Right.
To show people that this is no big deal. Now, maybe he had been in the fetal position multiple times with cold or whatnot. And so we're going to play it because he was dead 8 days after he had posted this. He was dead of COVID. And you notice how he was saying, the potential dangers of this experimental jab, and I'd rather take my chances. And it is perfectly within people's rights to take their chances with things. But he doesn't know what his chances are. And the question is why? Why is he so fundamentally wrong on what his chances are? Cambridge educated, smart person. Why is he so wrong in assessing what the chances are of him dying from taking the vaccine or dying from COVID? And he looks at, he looks, he's well into his 50s, seems to me. And as you get older with COVID, your chances of death increase dramatically. I don't know. Maybe he's in, I don't know how old he was. But
58.
58. And so his chances of getting seriously ill with COVID versus his chances of getting seriously ill with the vaccine. And that's what it's all about. Listen, it's impossible to imagine a vaccine where there are no side effects. Same with every single medical procedure. You go in and get your wisdom teeth out. There is no doubt in my mind that there have been complications with people getting their wisdom teeth out in the history of getting their wisdom teeth out. You go in for any routine surgery, whatever it is. You could take an aspirin, not realize that you were allergic. Like there's risk associated with everything that involves medicine, really anything we do in life. And we make a choice in everything we engage in weighing those risks. How did this guy have such a skewed notion, and it's not just him, as to what those risks were? Let's look at his Facebook. Well, let's look at we know. We know because he's talking about posting this stuff on Facebook. This is where he lives.
People need to watch this. Red pilled on COVID vaccine is the name of the title, and there's somebody in the center there who people may recognize.
Yeah, that's not a title from the Dark Horse itself. That's a clip posted by somebody else called Red Pilled on the COVID vaccine. It was an extended clip from the Brett Weinstein show.
And this guy, we just saw, oh my God, it's millions.
Oh, that show particularly?
No, that clip.
That individual clip has in the thousands, but that show has more than that.
And so this guy's posting this. This is not even what he consumed. This is what he's promoting now. He's bought into it so much. Is there another picture? Do we have more? Let's see what else he was promoting. He was convinced was the truth, where he got his assessment as to what his chances were. Well, this is about ivermectin, which I guess has now been proved not to have any impact.
It's the new hydroxychloroquine, basically magic bullet treatment. Which, like, I don't understand why we're trusting ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, but not the vaccine. But
well, because it's been around for 40 years.
Oh well,
there have been more.
It's experimental. We trust scientists to advocate for the efficacy of different drugs we're going to put into our bodies, but not.
Do we have one more picture? Let's put this one up. These are just things that he.
Of course.
You're blocking Leslie Lawson. Why is this information being blocked? And it's the big tech censorship of ivermectin.
As it's online.
Livestream 82. What is that? What is live? Oh wait, what's that?
Horse.
What's that thing up in the corner there, right above the tape, over the B? What is that symbol?
That's the Dark Horse podcast.
Wow, he was really into that show.
Yep.
Well, let's look at this. Let's look at this clip of Brett Weinstein with Dr. Robert Malone, who introduces himself as the inventor of the mRNA, not the mRNA COVID vaccine, but the mRNA technology. That is a controversial statement in and of itself.
Yeah.
And researcher Steve Kirsch, who's an engineer, just an engineer, which, I'm not an engineer. That takes some skill, but he's an engineer. Do we have this segment where Steve Kirsch talks about how he came across this?
Yeah, this is in fact from that the red pilled on the COVID vaccine clip we mentioned earlier.
And is this where he's talking about his carpet cleaner?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I want to see if anybody sees a problem with this. Okay.
Oh, okay, sure. So it got started when my carpet cleaner came and he was wearing a mask, and I said, "Hey, we're all vaccinated. You can take it off." And he said, "I just got I got the Pfizer vaccine, and I had a heart attack 2 minutes later." And so he spent the night in the hospital, and he says, he's kind of recovering from it. And I said, "How are you doing now?" And he said, still, feeling bad about it. And he mentioned also that his wife, also her hand, she'd hold a glass like this. and her hand would be shaking like this, and the water would be coming out. And she was perfect before. So I have two people. We have very few people in my house because of COVID. So the fish guy, the carpet cleaner, and the house cleaner, right? And so to have not just one person, but him and his wife, I mean, that is like lightning striking twice in the same place.
And that is the basis upon which he's convinced there's something going on with the vaccine. Now, here's a story. Lightning does sometimes strike within like 100 feet of each other during a thunderstorm. And to then surmise that there is some type of broader lesson to be learned from that is not science at all.
It's like running into somebody that you know in a place you didn't expect. That must be on purpose. Yeah, that's science.
It's not actually science that lightning doesn't strike twice in the same place. Otherwise, we'd have a big problem with the tops of buildings.
I mean, and then based upon this, and
and the other guy that claims to be like the father of mRNA also casting his aspersions. Like, what lesson would a guy like that take from this?
Of course. And the fact of the matter is that we have how many vaccines, how many vaccinations have we done now in this country? Not even full ones. Like, I mean, how many have been, is it 300 million doses, 400 million doses?
No, I mean, we have 330 million people in this country.
Yeah, but people are getting double doses.
I thought you meant first round. Sorry, at least. So this is what I like.
357 million doses of the vaccine. 357 million. Now, we have over 600,000 people who are dead in this country from COVID. We know this, and we also know that it is more than likely undercounted. More than likely undercounted. We know this by comparing year over year deaths. And we just know that's what the epidemiologists say. Now, maybe they're all in the big pocket of big COVID, big virus. But that's what the epidemiologists say. Here is when Brett Weinstein had to reckon with the idea that his misinformation made that guy, Leslie Lawrence, and, who knows how many other people out there, right? But we just know Leslie Lawrence because he was so adamant about it.
And his family, I should say, found out about those videos that he was posting and sharing when they were looking for pictures for his funeral.
And this guy's assessing his chances. And he's clearly been consuming a lot of this
Dark Horse
podcast where the guy is like, I'm a PhD. I am a doctorate.
I have authority, and I'm also clearly quite wealthy because I have a fish guy to clean my aquarium.
Well, that's the engineer. That's not Brett Weinstein's the one who was hosting.
Oh, no, I know.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
But still, they're going on the podcast speaking with authority about things, and they have consequences.
Here is how Brett Weinstein responded to the critique that, hey, man, you're putting out misinformation that is literally killing people, that is literally making them misassess their chances of getting COVID and dying versus getting the vaccine and dying. And here's put up this is when he responds to it on air.
The tweets are directly to it. So let's maybe put the tweets up right now. If you have those, Bradley.
He responds, this is him 2 days ago. This has always been about life and death. I've been clear about that. COVID is a dangerous disease. I've said so often. But lethal as SARS-CoV-2 is, the capture of public health, drug safety, academic medicine by an industry that's fueled by a disease makes it even more dangerous. What the F does that mean? Is he implying that it's like it has completely disoriented all of the people involved in this, and all of people who are involved in medicine, in academia, and in clinical? They're all just in the throes of something that I can see it. I am protected by the cone of the dark horse. And I am not in any way swayed by this. In fact, I have an engineer here who had a carpet cleaner
and a fish guy
in his. What are the chances? And they're all in the pocket or mesmerized by big COVID. And they can't see what I can see. And I'm going to say it in a calm manner so I don't seem like an absolute raging lunatic. Put up his next thing. So here he is. I take Mr. Lawrence's death seriously, but no more seriously, but no more seriously than those of Jacob Clinic and Simone Scott. Jacob Clinic is a 13-year-old boy who died within a day or two of, I think, his second dose of vaccine. Lived in Michigan. This happened in July. It's unclear on why he died. Well, keep that up for a sec. And Simone Scott died in June, sometime after getting vaccinated. Unclear why she died. Also a teenager. He takes Mr. Lawrence's death seriously, but no more seriously than those of Jacob Clinic. Well, first off, you would think you would take Mr. Lawrence's death more seriously just by the very fact that this guy had gotten all the information that he based his choice on from you.
And that his family is saying that his misinformed views led to his death and him not getting the vaccine.
And we know that Leslie Lawrence died of COVID. It's not a question of taking the death more seriously or not. Yeah, they're all dead. But which of those were preventable? Which do we know for a fact were preventable? Which one was based upon a choice that one of those three made, an active choice where they thought they were making the right choice? It's quite possible that those two children who died of the vaccine,
or after the vaccine.
After the vaccine, rather. We don't know if they died from the vaccine. We don't know at all.
But he's able to draw he'll draw that conclusion, but not the statistical overwhelming conclusion about the vaccine's efficacy in preventing serious illness and death.
First off, he's saying that they died from the vaccine,
which I don't even think
there's
their
no
families
proof
are
of.
saying. Yeah,
there's no proof of. There's 100% proof that Lawrence died of COVID. And so he's equating those two realities, right? Like, you talk about misinformation about chances. In fact, there were two people who died.
It's 2-1.
Two people who died, he says, of the vaccine. Only one who died of COVID. I mean,
the global
in his tweet, by the way, exactly. This is all based on his tweet statistics, not global statistics, not national statistics.
The 4.38 million people documented who have died of COVID, and it's probably 2 times that. I don't know. That's not in his analysis whatsoever.
Not to mention long COVID.
Mm-hmm.
The two people who may have died, in his mind, but definitely did die of the vaccine, in his mind, and there's only one that died of COVID. And so, if I'm the next Lawrence and I'm trying to assess my chances, what's the assessment I'm going to make based upon what this guy's putting out there?
Well, he had a doctor on an engineer, and that's ultimately it. When you're a Cambridge educated, whatever you are, who consumes their media online, as long as there's a doctor attached to it, that's all that matters, Sam.
I mean, look, if I wasn't skeptical, if I didn't know Brett Weinstein, and I tuned into that and I saw these like calm people talking, and
Brett has so much content. It's not like these guys have his viewers have enough time to watch other stuff, because he does like 2 hours a day. I mean, not to. I mean, we also do that, but like this is probably like the best source of information. I mean, I say the best, the most significant and time-consuming source of information these people are putting their attention toward.
Well, I mean, really amazing to me that somebody could live with themselves like that.
Oh yeah,
I think it's like an identity though. Like if this guy went to Cambridge and you look at Brett Weinstein's his audience and the way he's trying to portray himself as a pseudo-intellectual with the Jacob, what's his name, Peterson, or what's his name, Peterson, the horrible guy, Jordan. Oh my God, Jordan Petersons of the world. It's like an identity, and they can't get off. I mean, we all know people like this. At this point in the pandemic, if you're that attached to such flawed logic and you're simultaneously trying to portray yourself as being a pseudo-intellectual, like they must be losing some audience.
Well, the Cambridge thing doesn't matter to me. Like
I think he's gaining audience.
These institutions are just institutions are completely, I mean, like Fugazis or whatever. But like
I agree, but it's like an identity. Like, oh, but I watch, of the people that I watch online, I'm not watching Tucker Carlson. I'm watching Brett Weinstein and the doctors.
The thing with these new brand of like kind of intellectual dark web types, they use and weaponize credentials and academia and the credibility that they can glean from that in order to build up their own pseudoscience and thus enrich themselves. And like you see that to a degree that I think is exponential in these corners. And
the critique is built into their message, which is we're being censored by big tech. Yeah. And so when that is like delivered as part of the knowledge you're passing on, you are building in the critique. The critique is like, hey, the vast majority of people who have looked at this think that you're out of your mind. Well, that's because, like I said earlier, big tech is censoring this. And they're building in the critique, and it creates this notion. And there's a lot of people out there. There's always been a huge market for it. And now we have the technology to deliver it to people even better, right? I mean, this is why Alex Jones was so big. This is why we always had conspiracy theories are so big. It is people who are looking for some special secret truth that is accessible only to them, and it is self-flattering too, right? Like, I mean, because this is like, I have the special truth. Nobody else has the special truth.
And
I have my oracle who's giving me the special truth, and they're doing it despite the fact that all the powerful forces don't want us to know the truth. I mean, it all sort of like becomes self-reinforcing.
The scarcity of it too increases the demand because you're the only one breaking through, and thus you have to come behind my paywall or whatever. So,
but I'm not even talking necessarily just for Brett Weinstein. I'm talking for, the Lawrence guy too, because then he becomes centered in this story where he is going to save people around him. That's why he's posting it up there too. Like, it gives him the opportunity to be the oracle in his family. And it is just like, it is preying on people. It is preying on people, and it
also gives people agency against a narrative that they feel is dominant, right? So it's like they have this actionable counter narrative that they feel like is precious, and they are the only ones that have access to it. And then, well, I'm going to be proven right until I die.
But it's also it is something that is actionable at a time where the pandemic has made people feel powerless.
Right.
And you're fighting against a force of nature, and these guys are giving you the key to fight back.
And my paranoia or my mistrust of authority is actually a virtue, and it's going to serve me in this scary, turbulent time.
I mean, that's it. It's like there's a lack of trust of any, and with all due respect to the institutions, our institutions have failed us. And so we're ripe for predatory. I mean, the last 20 years has been ripe for this kind of behavior to prey on, a middle-aged guy who went to Ivy Leagues, probably trusted institutions, didn't, I don't know what ended up happening in his life, but there's something in which he saw it and then latched onto it. This is how it works now, right?
It really is fascinating. Like people who are say they're seeking truth and facts it's just a scam that makes you feel good about yourself.
Here, play that last clip of Brett Weinstein and Heather Haying on Dark Horse. This is from August 11th, where they realize, like, it's not our fault.
In essence, you will find many people saying, well, lives are at stake, and what you're saying on your podcast is going to result in the death of people. And this is, on the one hand, as we ourselves have said before anyone else said it about us, obviously there are lives at stake, and so we take this very seriously. On the other hand, it is cheating to hold us responsible for this. The correct, honorable way to do this is to recognize that lives are at stake in the public health policy questions and your personal health decisions with respect to how you choose to protect yourself from COVID. That is true. What that means is that a great deal rests on how the evidence is interpreted. And it is true, you can certainly protect yourself from the accusation that you will be responsible for other people's health consequences and possibly deaths by not saying anything. That's true. You can simply not say anything, or you can embrace.
Pause it. I love the idea that it is selfish for you to actually not provide information that is really just completely speculative when it comes to the life and death. It's selfish. You can protect yourself from that, accusation. That's what he's saying. You're a coward.
If you don't accept who are not broad consensus by scientists, right?
If you say nothing,
my video.
if you say nothing about the skepticism, you are just protecting yourself. You're a coward. But the implication is, Brett Weinstein, I am not a coward. I have a higher principle beyond any type of responsibility I feel about not putting out misinformation in a life or death situation. And that higher principle is, I should just say what's on my mind.
It's like David Goliath mythology. And then they want people to glom onto it. And then, of course, they're the only ones that benefit in the process, though.
It's predatory. I mean, all of this stuff.
It's also diluted. Here, but we keep playing.
You can simply not say anything, or you can embrace the conventional wisdom as dispensed by public health authorities, and then who could possibly hold you responsible? On the other hand, you've watched those public health officials fail again and again and again. And we can talk about why they might be failing. There are at least two reasons on the table. One of them is incompetence, inability to read what is taking place in the world. The other is corruption, which is something that you and I have talked about from the beginning. And both of these things are rendering the advice we are being given publicly feeble. So the question is what to do about it. If you're in a position like we are in, do you talk about what you see, or do you keep quiet so as not to be blamed? Right now, my feeling is we are morally
responsible, not an option.
To the extent that we believe we can see something that is failing about the public health analysis, we are morally required to engage in talking about this.
Oh my God.
You are not required to listen. You are certainly not required to extrapolate from anything that we say on this podcast and adjust your behavior. You can just listen into a discussion. Imagine it's a seminar taking place in which we are talking about whether or not the public health analysis makes any sense. Now, if you find yourself persuaded.
This guy's a psycho. I mean, this is just absolutely psychotic. He is now claiming that he has a moral obligation to say these things, but thinks that there's absolutely no impact on what he's saying. It's completely like I have a moral obligation. I'm a tree that just develops this fruit and does so in a way that doesn't have to conform with other people's sense of like what is a healthy fruit. And it's my moral obligation to do this, but I have no control over whether someone picks it up and bites it.
I'm a tree that grows gummy bears, and I'm going to claim that it's fruit and that it's healthy for you. And if you say that it's not a gummy bear, that it's actually an apple, then you're trying to censor me.
So
wait.
Days when these quacks would get in trouble, they get fined, they get the actual doctors, and he's not a doctor, but the doctors who would share this stuff would actually go to jail for this kind of. The actual doctor.
He's got a doctorate.
Oh, maybe there's a loophole here. The doctorate of bullshit philosophy.
There's one more clip I want to introduce into this. And this was from a while back where Heather and Brett were pushing this study.
Are they married?
Yes. Or their partner.
Oh, what a lovely marriage.
They were both at Evergreen too.
They talk very low and.
So this was a story that was quickly retracted, and the University of Poznan distanced themselves. That said that 2 vaccinated people died for every 3 deaths prevented. The Brett and Heather completely ran with this, and we have this next clip here is them talking about the retraction, just the bitter way that they like wanted it to be true. And also, I will go back. I just retweeted as Bradley's getting that ready. Brett defended Bill Maher back in the day when he was going on his anti-vax stuff, and PZ Myers get into it. So this looks like a long theme with Brett and anti-vax stuff.
The first is this Wallach et al. 2021 paper that we talked about in Psyche. Both of us had seen it. Neither of us had read it. And we mentioned that what it had found effectively was that the vaccinations for every 3 lives that they were saving, for every 3 lives that they were saving, they were actually costing 2 lives. This paper has in fact since been retracted. There are enough problems with it. I don't think it's worth going into all of the problems with it.
Over the course of COVID, we have seen papers retracted that didn't need to be retracted. In this case, the methodological flaws are real flaws. And so I think the retraction is absolutely warranted.
Sometimes now, basically, retractions are a political move in which activists get to
Pause it for 1 second. This is fascinating. Okay, let's just be clear here. They were promoting a piece that they hadn't read. The implication being, of course, if we had read it, we would have seen that it would have been that there were methodological problems. But of course, we should also tell you that not only do we want to mention that this retraction is there, so we've covered ourselves, because it's our moral obligation to have presented it in the first place, even though we didn't read it. Because it's our moral obligation to react to headlines, and it's not necessarily up to you to actually say anything. I don't know why they felt obligated to retract it, to talk about the retraction, because it's not their moral obligation to do anything other than just ruminate. That they somehow feel like they have a responsibility to their audience at this point to retract it. But at the same time, we just also want to let you know that retractions are sometimes not really retractions. Sometimes they're done for corrupt reasons and for political reasons. So who really knows? There could be some truth to this thing, even though there's methodological problems, which I just state because with confidence, even though there's no reason to believe that they ever read it even now. Right? Like, if you didn't read it when you were promoting it, why would you read it after the fact? No, they read the retraction, said there were methodological problems, claimed that they also agree that there were methodological problems, which implies that they read it and have the ability to assess methodological problems. So even their announcing that there was a retraction on something they ran with adds to their credibility.
Can't lose.
And you're telling me that this is not masturbatory, huh?
I would just say that this is the guy that about a year ago...
It would be masturbatory if what they were ejaculating wasn't killing people.
Yeah, exactly. On that point, Brett Weinstein over a year ago added Sam and TYT, said that I need to not facetiously say that he was consulting with a DHS goon fan about Antifa race war, and that I should be terminated my employment because of the obvious danger that I was engaging in. So I don't know what this is. Nobody has to listen to what you say on Twitter. You're just morally obligated to say that. Yeah, I think there's some obvious danger going on when you have guys, 50-year-olds, not taking the vaccine and saying, everyone needs to watch this a few weeks before dying.
Is he worried about his audience dying? Just for the most selfish reasons.
Are you kidding? There is a massive, massive market for this, and he's just tapping into it. He's doing, I guarantee you, the moment he saw a dip in his YouTube numbers, and he could associate it with this, he would tack away from it.
Yeah.
He's morally obligated to follow where his YouTube algorithm leads him. I mean,
remember in the early days of COVID, like you'd get knocked for saying like anything about COVID, anything. Do you remember that? Like the first week you just get pinged and they'd be like, oh, you can't talk because we didn't know enough. Meanwhile, this mother effer is on there saying stuff that is indisputable. with quack doctors and engineers of who knows what. And people literally are dying. His audience actually is dying as a result of his consultation.
Yeah, Left Reckoning got a misinformation strike because we were making fun of a PragerU kid who said that this was all a hoax. And this guy's just regularly going up there saying stuff that's turning people in mass away from the vaccine.
He's being censored, Matt. Censored.
Matt. He's saying it in a voice like this.
Oh, no.
Which makes it seem like he is actually being thoughtful about things.
Well, Sam, I am an academic. I have a degree, and
You need to drop your register just a little bit.
a little bit more
And
NPR
slow
type.
down a little bit. And then you'll be able to speak with credibility about the same stuff that Alex Jones is.
Because do you see, I am above the fray in terms of emotion, so I do not get too high, I do not get too low. I can speak with credibility on anything when my voice is this quiet.
If I heard that one of our listeners,
Joe Biden has a weather machine.
if one of our listeners died and their wife was going through their Facebook looking for funeral pictures and they came across things that content I produced that led to their death, I wouldn't be able to sleep. And I'd feel sick to my stomach for weeks, and Brett's just indignant.
I won't even talk about financial, even ruminate on financial advice, because I would be I don't want to be in any way responsible for having someone,
Lose money.
lose the savings on something. I mean, never mind. I mean, honestly, if I was in that, but that's why I wouldn't be in that position.
But that's the whole, listen, this just exposes their entire industry right there. The fact that he has no remorse at all, no real remorse, just exposes who he is.
And the fact is that there's a bunch of them.
Of course. But here's okay, yes, he has a calm voice. It's very NPR, whatever that Alec Baldwin episode was on SNL. Remember that? But simultaneously, there's also the screaming people. And so they're covering their bases.
I think it's just like people just, chasing cash is basically what it's and chasing, clout and fame and whatever it is. Fippy. You should interview Christopher Ketchum, author of This Land, How Cowboys, Capitalism, and Corruption Are Ruining the American West. Didn't I just put that in the list? Or did you just have him? Christopher Ketchum? I think I just put, I think we are efforting that, as we say. But if not, will you put that, Bradley, will you put that in? Majority Report wardrobe coordinator. What's Pirate Amy Goodman's favorite letter? Come on, wait for an answer, preferably in a pirate voice. But you think it would be R, but it's really the C. Oh, that's pretty good.
That's pretty good, yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and say that the engineer on the Dark Horse podcast is allegedly lying for clout. What's more likely? There's a mass conspiracy where everyone in the medical industry is lying to make money, or one dude is just projecting and monetizing people's fear.
Well, does he say it in a soft voice?
We'll see. Chantel, I have been a follower for almost 4 years, but now, 4 years now. But I honestly feel now MR has become an echo chamber. Emma, at best, takes a different option or counters only to agree eventually or let the topic go. I miss the time when Jamie or Michael would push Sam really hard and make him reflect on opinions, deeper sometimes almost for 30 minutes. Well, I can tell you this, that when you started watching the show was just as Michael was developing his own voice on some level. And
it was also a different time. This is not an election year either. There's the conversation topics are.
Yeah, I think there is some truth to the idea that we don't have as much internal debate. Part of it, I think, is the topics. I think part of it is just over time, Emma and I are going to have divergent ideas on things.
You should see them off air. Emma's always throwing daggers at him.
Maybe we're a little closer in politics than Jamie and Sam. That's I understand your critique. I just can't be anybody other than who I am.
And I think ultimately the show will develop. We'll bring in new people. We're still a person short And over time, when it becomes clear that we're going to be in here, I thought as of in May, or April, I thought like March even, I thought like, okay, by June, we're going to be in here for good. And then like June came and July came, and then I was like, well, maybe we're out of here in September. So yeah, we'll see. But I mean, I don't think that's, I think like if
you're discounting the big yard sign debate of 2021,
exactly,
and which I was just vindicated on. And look, I would agree that that's like the space between Sam and I is not that of Michael or Jamie, although like they can characterize that. But I do think I have my own voice that's different than Sam's. And just listen a little bit harder.
I will also say this. Go watch some episodes from 2013, and you will not find, Michael was on a path, and in 2013, he was not on that path. I mean, that's just the reality of it, and so.
It's also just, what you said about not being in studio together, that's a real thing. Like there's a delay even conversing with each other, like building that rapport, building that dynamic takes time. And remember like in the old days when they'd say they wouldn't cancel the shows, like for instance, like Seinfeld, the first season sucked, the second season sucked, but they kept renewing because they knew that they had to build that rapport with, and then eventually,
oh yeah,
and that's how it works. I mean, it doesn't happen like that. No. Especially if you're not in person, and especially if it's not an election year where everybody's, there's an opinion thrown from every different angle.
Right. I mean, I think like, but, and also, I don't know, I'm tired sometimes. It's like this has been, the pandemic has been difficult.
I think the show's going well. I think we're in a good spot. And I understand the critique though. I do. And that's fine.
It's not always now in Ottawa. It's always now in Ottawa. Emma, what's your 30-second takeaway from Bachelor in Paradise last night? 30 seconds.
I didn't finish the episode.
It was good. I don't even know what to say yet. None of the couples have formed. It's only the first night. So, but like Brendan, not old Brendan, but the guy from the show, he's dreamy. That's what I will say.
He's from Milford, Mass, Sam. He's from Milford.
Next time.
Okay, great. All right, great. Okay, perfect.
This is a difference between you two.
Oh, there you go.
Emma's voice.
Nina Perez, Palm Beach County, Florida, where I live, just requested a state of emergency. Belle Glade, which is our poorest community and pretty far away from what most people think about when they think about this country, has only 12 ICU beds, and they're full with 11 of them being COVID patients. They called 14 local hospitals requesting they take some patients, and they all refused because they are also reaching capacity. Patients are being shipped to Orlando and Miami, who are also being slammed. It's infuriating for so many reasons, but also shining a spotlight on how a hospital in the poorest area has so few resources to start with. Of course, Belle Glade is always the first to suffer here, and Palm Beach Island, home of Trump and Epstein, is the first to get resources. I mean, that was the story in New York, too. In New York City.
But in March.
In March. Yeah.
Of last year.
A Square. Sam, thanks for starting off with Lee's speech. You and Janine and Digby and Randy and Malloy were a source of sanity and courage during post 9/11 and the march to war. I mean, that was, I wasn't on radio until 2004. I mean, Janine, the lead up to Iraq, but, I guess maybe in that sense. Afghanistan, another failed, fevered American empire and capitalism dream at the cost of so much. Off topic, but there are so many ramifications and bad externalities to student debt that your guest highlighted. Great interview. The reference about civic engagement and the access to arts for the surrounding college community at affordable prices and likely progressive ethos may seem minor to some, but critical to so many, including boomers retiring and people who don't otherwise have access to arts and culture. Sarah, hey Sam, as a supporter, I really want to know what the mission of your channel now. Don't you think earlier you used to engage in more deeper discussions? Sarah.
Is this the same person?
That's weird. Sarah, or should I call you Chantel?
Damn, I thought things were going good. We got a lot of critiques in here.
I think we've had some,
Wait, I might be wrong, but I feel you're mostly doing reaction videos now or commenting on Jimmy Dore's of the world, Jimmy Jore's.
You don't watch the live show.
I would recommend you watch the hour-long interviews we do at the front of almost every single show.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a propaganda line at this point. I don't think that person remotely watches the show or even cares about that opinion. I think they just wanted to interrupt the show with it. Maybe I'm too cynical, but yeah, like we've had some of the greatest conversations we've had in this past few weeks. I mean, I don't know what they're talking about. I mean, that's the great thing about doing the show, the dumb way that we do it with the vegetables up front that alienates people.
Yes. I mean, this is the thing, is that like your favorite YouTube show does what you're talking about. And show me another show that does 4 to 5 hours a week of interviews. Like, we do a season of some of the top podcast interviews in a month.
We
Like,
also
honestly.
do a second show with.
And then, well, yeah, but they're not
Interviews.
watching that. That's not available.
That's fine, but
that's-
like, I mean, the fact that the accusation that we're less interested in substance as a second show on Peacock is now in the throes. We're in the throes of that. Makes less sense because we're doing more actually.
Crowder squirts. I miss the old days when Sam used to bash Jimmy Dore. Sean from NorCal. It's useless to think you can empower a country that bases their entire reality on. Oh my God, you said this yesterday. What an ass. Nerd cheetah. Oh, that bases its entire reality on religious sycophantism and subservience. I got some bad news for you, Chief.
Created America, buddy.
I don't know if you're aware of where you live. Maybe you don't. Maybe Northern California is not in United States. But I get some very bad news for you. Nerd cheetah. Even if it wasn't the plan to have Biden leave after one term and attempt to install Harris Mayor Pete administration, do you think Afghanistan will seal the deal on Democratic defeat and make a Paul Ryan, Liz Cheney administration more likely? I would bet every single dollar I own that there will never be a Paul Ryan or a Liz Cheney in the White House.
I mean, like, the crazy thing about this situation is there is a really amazing opportunity. I say amazing not in a positive way, and amazing in a broad way, for him to actually to message this properly, to make this a truly teachable moment. And Biden has, like, I mean, other than just the strategic aspect, flubbed this. Messaging wise, he's flubbed this. If he's going to make it about pulling out, he has done absolutely nothing to explain how Republicans have created this disaster. It's just been, I don't want another administration going through this again, or more lives lost. It's not pointing to Ronald Reagan, because that's exposing who we are as a country.
That was the overall failure. It's just like, why can't we learn a broader lesson to this? This is a huge mistake.
Because that's his ideology.
But that may be that Emma may have the point there. Like it's
he's
not even
gonna...
a question of messaging as much as it is like she doesn't want that message out.
Well, he wants to bring the troops home, but he doesn't want to be in conflict with the concept of American empire.
Yes. And he also doesn't want that flubbed on his record. He wants to be known as the president who's a little bit different. And not, of course, Donald Trump created a scenario for him in which he actually had to do this. And he handled it.
He said that.
Horribly.
He said
horribly.
That. Emma knows corn. My partner works in refugee resettlement. It took Biden months to sign off on the new post-Trump presidential determination, a relatively simple process, which gives the number of refugees the U.S. will accept. Yes, we remember this, right? Like he was going to, originally he said something like 75,000, then they went down to like, we're going to let in, 1,200 or something to that effect. And then they had to balance it up. Yes, without a doubt. In other words, the Biden administration actually clogged up that resettlement process more than was necessary in the months leading to this moment. Since January, many small U.S. cities have been waiting to accept more people than the number that have been allowed to come. Indeed, that is the biggest failure, it seems to me.
And just from the perspective of being here in Greece, on top of this, simultaneously, they're shutting down most of the refugee centers in Greece, which shuts everything down for Europe because of the right-wing government that's now in place. So how is that going to play out when, the few places that we're taking refugees globally, where do refugees go? Where do they go?
Right.
Ruth Conda forever. Just got my ballot for the California governor recall. Is there a candidate who's better option than Newsom? Or if I vote to recall, will that just make it easier for Caitlyn Jenner to win? Yeah, or Larry Elder. I would not vote for the recall.
I'm gonna have someone on Friday to talk about it.
I mean, this is not an endorsement of Gavin Newsom.
We should tell people that you're going to be out.
I'm going to be out.
Okay.
Not in support of Gavin Newsom.
Thursday, Friday, all next week.
I am going on vacation. Emma
so that
I
am, or you're going to see a lot more of me.
Things are going to, but I will call in and I am and nasty things to get Emma.
Yeah. Well, I mean, remember when Rush Limbaugh died and you weren't in studio? Maybe something big will happen.
Reese's Pieces. Blowback was great context for the lead up to Iraq. Strong recommend. That's the podcast. And now they're doing, what are they doing now?
Cuba,
right. Shore Rap. At work, I recently came into close contact with someone who has COVID. We were driving to the bank to do a deposit for the casino, and we were in the vehicle for about 30 minutes total. She doesn't have the vaccine, but I do, and so far the rapid tests have been negative for me. I get the slower test results tomorrow to know for sure, but so far 0 symptoms. Can I get a shofar for my unvaccinated coworker to wish her a speedy recovery?
Yes.
In general, the rapid tests are only, their efficacy is when you have symptoms. They have much less efficacy when you do not have symptoms, to the extent that that's helpful. But it's good that you took the longer one.
It's just crazy too. Like, and just anecdotally, one of my good friends, her boyfriend got breakthrough COVID. They're both fully vaccinated and they live together in a 1-bedroom. And she didn't get it the whole time. And she did multiple PCRs and they quarantined and everything. So like, it's just so odd.
Yeah,
you know how.
I know somebody who was out at a bar with somebody who later found out they had breakthrough COVID, and they also did not get it themselves.
I just would have thought that she's. I was like, "Are you quarantining? Is he staying in the living room? Or are you staying in the bedroom?" She's like, "There's nowhere to go. Like, what are you gonna? What am I gonna do?" And she didn't get it.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I mean, there was the whole thing with the guy the place I was doing the studio out of. Everybody, I mean, his office they all had COVID and were vaccinated, and it started getting psychosomatic too, because you're like, I'm feeling like dizzy, and it was 118 degrees here. Of course I was feeling dizzy, but
yeah,
you don't know. And also it's like, how is your vaccine? Like, which vaccine is it? I don't know. They all got vaccines together. So maybe there was something about how the vaccine was stored. Who knows?
Or yeah. I mean, I think it's going to take years for us to really understand what it's going to take. It's going to take years before we really understand these dynamics, I think. I love Sebastian Lemba. I love the current and past MR crew. Emma is an awesome addition, and I watch more consistently than ever. Who's the guy on the right with glasses, though? I always see him on except for Thursdays, and he's the least interesting part of the program. Why does Emma keep bringing him back on?
You guys, you don't need to reassure me. I'm confident in my contributions. I appreciate it, though.
Ryan Cole. Bin Laden on the loose was far more useful to the Cheney administration than captured and facing justice. The threat was the excuse to pursue all of our imperial policies in the Middle East. Yeah, I agree totally. Wait, what? People get the COVID vaccine and still die? Tell us more, Brett Weinstein. Brett Weinstein actually has words of wisdom. It's best to keep your mouth shut. Too bad he's incapable of following his own words. AJ in Colorado. Sam, update from Colorado Springs. One of the local school districts has updated its COVID policies. They will not require masks. Positive cases will not be reported to the county health department. That's helpful. And the district will not cooperate with contact tracing. The district also just voted to ban critical race theory.
What? How is that legal that they're not allowed to, they're not reporting? That can't be legal.
Welcome to America. I mean, you're not here. Call freedom.
I may never come back, guys.
Call freedom. Let's just do this. Let's play this Chris Cuomo thing. Look, I don't care about Chris Cuomo, broadly speaking. I really don't. I mean, I don't. I've watched his show. I don't know. Two times. I mean, maybe not fully. But
it'd be odd to sit down and watch it actually.
Like from start to finish. Is he on? Is he at 9 p.m.? Do we know? No, we don't even know.
I think it's 9 p.m. I watch it.
Okay.
I watched it, I should say, during the height of
Aaron Burnett.
I just want to say that regardless of what Chris Cuomo did or did not do, CNN should have taken him off the air.
100%.
Or they should have said, okay, Chris Cuomo's brother is governor of New York State. We're going to have, if we ever do reporting on Chris Cuomo's brother, Steve McKenzie or Janet Stevenson or whoever it is going to come on and they're going to do the segment on this. It's going to be awkward, but what are you going to do? And we're going to allow him to invite his brother on one time. It'll be the Christmas special and it'll be a fun segment and that's it. Okay, this is like the functional, we got ice cream sundaes because it's Thanksgiving or something like that. You bring your brother on.
Look how quirky it is. A brother in government, a brother in media.
How can you think you maintain any type of credibility with this?
Why is this an issue now? This is like journalism 101. How is this an issue now and not 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago? It is mind-boggling that this is only now recently an issue because there were chats discovered or conversations discovered.
Which one should we do? 10 or 11? Let's do number 10.
I've told you it's never easy being in this business and coming from a political family, especially now. This situation is unlike anything I could have imagined.
I'm sorry.
Pause it. Yeah, we should come back from vacation.
Okay.
Right?
Oh, it's not easy? It's not easy. It's not easy to have your job because of your father, and it's not easy to make millions of dollars.
You should have Meghan McCain on to talk about
exactly.
this.
Yeah.
or Alicia Menendez. Or Abby Huntsman. Or Chelsea Clinton. It is you.
What's the Bush daughter?
Or the Bush one, Jenna Bush.
Jenna Bush.
Keep it going.
Yeah, that's probably maybe the best one.
They you know what? They should do a round table and talk about it.
Oh my God. I think they actually had that show, Sam. It was on MSNBC.
I would actually tune in for that.
Group therapy about privileged kids who got their jobs because of their family's connections.
All that happens is you get your foot in the door, which is, everybody gets their foot in the door, except for everybody who does not get their foot in the door because of your name. And then, of course, you keep going on. Because this guy is a classic host, isn't he? This guy.
And again,
exactly.
If he had done what we said, we should say to the audience, if he had done what he said, if he'd recused himself from covering his brother, if he came to this segment with humility and talked about how he got this because of probably his family's advantages, he may have worked hard, sure, but that's why he was able to get his foot in the door. I don't think we'd have a problem with it.
But here he is. He's back from vacation, right? Was he on vacation?
It was his birthday. And he takes a week off every birthday, guys. You have to make sure to mention that.
A little weird to care that much about your birthday as an adult, but...
Family, especially now. This situation is unlike anything I could have imagined. And yet I know what matters.
Pause it for 1 second. I'm sorry. You know what might have allowed you to imagine it was when you're interviewing your brother and going hey, I wonder if this is a conflict. Just even though there's no scandal that's rocking. Well, no. Let me rephrase that. There's no scandal that caused him to resign, but there's been a lot of scandals with my brother. I mean, he got rid of the Moreland Commission, and it was because they were investigating him, and it was supposed to be an independent commission. Or there's some controversy around the IDC, or there's some controversy about him firing the MTA head, or there's some controversy about his, property taxes.
Or the fact that there was an open secret with journalists that he'd call them and berate him, and this is the industry that he works in.
I mean, book sale.
Could you really not imagine you to ever be in this situation where someone could be contemplating a conflict of interest? I guess maybe some people have a limited imagination. Okay.
Sam, did you not watch the segments with them? All they were doing were talking about their mama's lasagna recipe in the height of COVID and just how great it was to be eating lasagna over Zoom with all the siblings. That was their segments. That was it. There was no conflict there. While Governor Cuomo was handling the situation brilliantly and covering up all the nursing home deaths and writing about it in his book. What are you talking about? It was about lasagna.
When I got that shot, when I got first in line for the shot, because he was my brother, it never occurred to me.
Oh my God, yeah.
When I had COVID tests at the regular, when people were unable to access them,
what are you going to do?
I couldn't foresee that this might be a problem.
All right, let's.
And yet I know what matters at work and at home. Everyone knows you support your family. I know and appreciate that you get that. But you should also know I never covered my brother's troubles because I obviously have a conflict. And there are rules at CNN about that. I said last year that his appearances on this show would be short-lived. And they were. The last was over a year ago, long before any kind of scandal.
Pause it.
I also said back then.
First off, that's just simply not true, any kind of scandal. I mean, it's not even remotely close. Right. But all I did was humanize him for several months on this program, and then I said it's going to end. In other words, the fact that we only had a massive conflict of interest for a limited period of time is actually shows how good I am at this. I mean, give me a break, but continue.
Over a year ago, long before any kind of scandal. I also said back then that a day would come when he would have to be held to account, and I can't do that. I said point blank, I can't be objective when it comes to my family. So I never reported on the scandal. And when it happened, I tried to be there for my brother. I'm not an advisor. I'm a brother. I wasn't in control of anything. I was there to listen and offer my take. And my advice to my brother was simple and consistent. Own what you did. Tell people what you'll do to be better. Be contrite. And finally, accept that it doesn't matter what you intended. What matters is how your actions and words were perceived. And yes, while it was something I never imagined ever having to do, I did urge my brother to resign when the time came. There are stories and critics saying all kinds of things about me.
Hold on.
Many unsupported.
Pause it. Did he just say he advised his brother to resign?
That's the news today. That advising that he did in the middle of the scandal was to say, well, I think that's the thing I'm unclear about, is when did he say to resign? Was it more recent, or was this when the first time he was advising his brother?
I think it was more recent. The day that he decided to.
Matt, you don't get it.
That's family. That's
you don't get
family.
it. Now look, he never ever covered the scandal, so he was not in a position of conflict of interest. Now, just because that means that his coverage there's no coverage of his scandals in prime time at CNN for that hour, that doesn't mean anything. There's no conflict. I'm a brother. I'm a brother.
It didn't happen. It didn't happen.
Story selection and what you choose to cover and not cover is a part of journalism.
What? No, you don't get it. That's my critics.
Chris Cuomo took part in strategy calls advising his brother in the Washington Post, the New York Governors, and that's what they said.
But I did it as a brother. I had no control over what he did.
Not as an advisor. I gave advice, not as an advisor on strategy calls with the rest of his staff, but not as an advisor.
I mean, honestly, like I don't have a problem with him doing that because that's his brother.
Yeah.
But you've got to, at that point, if you're going to stay on air, and CNN is more culpable, I think, than he is.
Right.
Because why he's going to go, like, I'm not going to give up airtime. And then his boss should have been like, yeah, you are. In fact, now, because we want you to be on air so much, every night there's going to be a 3-minute story by that reporter over there sitting at that desk who you guys don't get along is going to take 3 minutes of your show and they're going to deliver the report on because we need to now go even further to show, like, that's the obligation. And if they had done that,
Actually, they did, Sam. They did. This is the crazy part. This is the part that's crazy. They did do that once the story got out of control to cover their asses. But they didn't do that they didn't say, why is Andrew Cuomo on air every single night? And I was watching it.
Right. He should not be on air at all with his brother.
At all.
Humanized at any point. I don't care if he's like an angel. Like, no. Sorry, dude. You just don't get to do that. That's one of the downsides. That's the price you got to pay. For being the son of a governor and a brother of a governor. I'm sorry, dude.
On how difficult it was. Like, that's really what you have to give up, right? Is that what he was talking about when he said that it was a long,
You have no idea the burdens you're going to have to deal with. But you're not going to be able to have the governor on and shoot the shit. Sorry. And that's because of your last name. Now, of course, if your last name was not Cuomo, you wouldn't have the opportunity to have the governor on and shoot the shit. So it's sort of a wash. Should we listen to more of this? Like, I don't know. If I was him, I would be like, yeah, let's listen.
Stories and critics saying all kinds of things about me, many unsupported. But know this, my position has never changed. I never misled anyone about the information I was delivering or not delivering on this program. I never attacked nor encouraged anyone to attack any woman who came forward. I never made calls to the press about my brother's situation. I never influenced or attempted to control CNN's coverage of my family. And as you know, back in May, when I was told to no longer communicate with my brother's aides in any group meetings, I acknowledged it was a mistake. I apologized to my colleagues, and I stopped, and I meant it.
So you advised him. So he says, I'm not an advisor, but I was an advisor.
He had a duty to speak up.
Brother, that's the
an informal advisor. Informal advisor.
I think he's actually doing this from a legal perspective. Like he is a lawyer. He's worried about being brought into this from a legal perspective. And so there is a family advisor and there's a legal advisor. And if you're in the middle of so many, he's being investigated from every single angle right now. I think this is a very specifically messaged monologue. And it's not about what the audience thinks. It's about protecting him and his job and the company. You know that lawyers were all over that.
Of course.
He's a very sensitive guy too. I remember last year during the protests, the Black Lives Matter protests for George Floyd, I tweeted something and I didn't add him. And it was something about his coverage. I can't even remember what it was, but he had said something extremely insensitive to the protesters. And he DM'd me like 5 messages. We don't follow each other. 5 messages defending himself and his coverage. And I was like, what? Is this guy like going through and just looking for his name in the search bar on Twitter to see what people are saying?
Did you? What's this? That time I made a joke about Chris Cuomo wearing a big Cuomo hat on the Davis brothers election, and he searched his own name and DM'd me.
That's it. Oh my God! What?
Who did this? Who is this? Terry Bedford? Is that who it is? Who is that? Who's Tori Bedford? Oh, she's reporter at GBH. And let's look at the DMs.
Oh my God, I have to find this now.
Off the record. Oops. You know what? Here's a tip, folks. When you deal with a reporter and you say off the record, they say they've got to agree.
Confirm.
Yeah. You don't write off the record and then talk. You say, can we speak off the record? And then the reporter says yes or no, because reporters are like that. And I will say this, that for non-reporters, for people who don't work in journalism, I think it's unfair. I honestly do. People don't understand there's a whole code and jargon that reporters have that they assume other people are aware of, and they're not. But Chris Cuomo should be aware of it. But read this. I'm fascinated by this. Okay. Off the record, how is my wearing a hat with the name of my show on it a move to help my brother? Hey, man, no disrespect. I was just pointing out that you wore a hat that had your shared last name on it. The hat just says Cuomo on a pretty pivotal day for your brother, Andrew Cuomo, and then you got jab at journalists, so you are one. So the joke is you low-key shouted him out in a positive way, and then he subtweets you in this mean way. Messed up. Did they make you change the hat in the afternoon? Off the record, it says Cuomo Primetime. That's the name of the show.
How is it off the record?
You pretend a significance to make a false point. Do you get that? I gave the hat away because someone asked for it. Wore another and wore a show shirt at night. Your analysis off and jaundiced.
What? Jaundiced?
Oh, no. Yeah, you can barely read the prime time. It's just Cuomo's very...
Well, right. It's such a negative, too. Prime time. Like, it is, in other words, like Cuomo, like prime time is also euphemism for, like, it's his time to shine.
Maybe that's why he was sensitive about it. The story, like his Cuomo primetime hat being made about his brother.
You know, the proper response to that is, if it genuinely is an innocent thing that he was doing, which it could have been, it also could have been like, I'm proud of my brother and I'm going to promote this and promote our name and whatnot. But the proper response, if it was an innocent mistake, is, you know what? That's a good point. That's an innocent mistake on my part, and I appreciate you pointing it out. I'm going to be more sensitive to that in the future. That's what you say.
Okay, I found mine. It's literally like the same thing.
Hold on. Did he do OTR beforehand?
No, he did not. So it's
okay.
Okay, so he just writes me, huh? And I wish I had the original tweet. I don't know what the original tweet was. He goes, huh? I was a clear standout and asking people to understand what lies beneath what you see. You are the one getting it wrong and spreading a false narrative. Please stop. Please watch my most recent closing argument on Instagram. It's hard enough to do this job without baseless attacks. And so I said, thanks for the clarification. So I watched you all night. I think what stood out was how there were moments you'd say things like, and sorry, I don't have the exact quote, but something like this. Quote, some may call this a mob, or one stood out in particular. Some may say this is a tyrannical Black group. And I was surprised because nobody in the mainstream, or maybe on Fox they do, is saying that. And why would it be important to repeat it? I understand what you were trying to do, but it came across differently. And then I just, that was it.
If somebody's saying that, I want to know the name of the person saying that, not some.
Exactly. Thank you.
Like, who's the a-hole? I want to judge that person for saying that, not just like the some use was always a big thing during the aughts, too. It was always like some way of basically trafficking an opinion that they had that they don't want to attribute to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Bingo.
And listen.
But listen, Sam.
No, I just want a message to Chris.
We're gonna go
or me or any of it. Like, the way you do it is off the record, ? And I would respond,
no
or yes. I don't know, but you got to wait for my confirmation.
Good journalism tip.
I do remember one moment when Mark Green called me into his office at Air America, and he said, he started to tell me like why he had fired Randy Rhoads. And he's like, and he stops himself and he goes, can we agree that this conversation is between us? And I was like, no, I'm going to talk about it. And then he said, he didn't know what to do, so he just kept talking.
That's why he's not mayor.
That's why I talk about it. I mean, I told him, I said to his face, like, no, anything you say to me, I'm going to say on air if I think it's worthwhile saying. And he's just like, well, I just think that, and then they went like that. Now, maybe he was going to say something different, but I get, I mean, I'm not going to lie to him. I'm going to repeat this. Come shower with Crowder. Do you think there's at least a small chance that Steven Crowder has been pretending to have heart issues to distract from his embarrassing moment with you?
I've been saying this.
Seemed to happen exactly after that debate. Also, congratulations for the birth of his baby. Thank God the pregnancy problems his wife was having at 11:50 a.m. didn't materialize into anything too serious.
Yes.
Oh, did his kid have a baby?
His wife.
I mean, did his wife have a baby?
Yeah, it appears, Mrs. Crowder and I have agreed that our children will not be in the public eye until they're old enough to make that decision themselves, which is nice.
Oh, that's good. That's smart.
There's pictures of them, but anyway.
Oh, all right.
And here's a photo of them and their social security number. So sad about it.
I don't think that's the case with Crowder. I don't. I think he actually had either something wrong with him or had elective surgery.
Yeah, I think that was a surgical procedure, but yeah, he was. Yeah, who knows?
That would be very, very involved.
I would not put it past him to do
Dad,
elective
can you
surgery
get me into
and
the
say-
hospital?
Yeah. And then say it was something more serious, but.
Rumsfeld in hell. It's extremely unlikely that the Empire State Building would have fallen if it was hit by a commercial airline like the ones that hit the World Trade Center. There's much more concrete steel in the Empire State Building. Yes, I know that, but they still evacuated my building. And I was on 29th and Park. And they evacuated that building.
For people who don't live in New York, how many blocks is that? Like, how far is that?
Empire State Building is at 34th Street and south. So I guess to 32nd Street. And, but it's also two avenues over. Madison Park to Madison to 5th. So.
Okay. So as the crow flies, it's pretty close.
Yeah, as the crow flies. Emma's tossed salad. Biden of all presidents.
Ah, come on, dude.
What?
What's that?
That's a sexual euphemism. I know that one.
That's horrifying.
As the crow flies?
Sam.
No. What you just read. Don't read the.
Oh my God, I had no idea. I didn't know what you were talking about.
That one I knew. The other
Okay.
one I didn't know. Obviously.
That's worse than reach around.
Don't repeat it, Bradley.
This person, Biden of all presidents who got us out of Afghanistan, who'd have thunk it? The interviews you do with experts in the first half is the only reason I'm a member. Oh, that's very sweet. Thank you. Glass-Steagall, and bad thing that you said in your IM thing. Glass-Steagall, I'm all for highlighting Tim Pool's chasmal stupidity and that he's a liar and a creep, but it shouldn't be lost that his content is also very extreme. He's constantly priming his audience for violent conflict with the left. He's been a massive anti-vaxxer similar to Tucker. His go-to comparison for immigrants is people breaking into your house, destroying it, robbing you. And he goes on maniacal rants at women, especially women of color. Yep. And the worst part, well, one of the really dangerous parts about Tim Dillon, he ostensibly does this as, of the left in his...
Or the center, or whatever
center.
it's called.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever that is.
Bowser with Schnauzer. I recently read on Twitter that the proper noun to refer to the people of Afghanistan is Afghan. The word Afghani is their currency. I appreciate that. Do you guys have any general insight into how Tucker's relationship with W factors into his talking points? I remember them having a very friendly dinner last year.
Interesting.
Is there a day coming when we get to hear the Perry Mason drops not get cut off by Zoom? We are we're trying to figure out if anybody knows of a device, and don't say a USB switcher because we can't find one powerful enough that will carry a signal for a camera. That's what we need right now to, I know it doesn't make sense to a lot of you, but all right, I'm going to read 5 more and then we're going to get out of here. Josh from Tucson. I reported yesterday my girlfriend's school had 2 confirmed cases that has since increased by several more in one day, becoming a veritable outbreak. Get vaxxed, people. That was lucky for me to pick that name out. We got like literally 75 IMs there. JJ Cool. Hey, Sam, I don't want to defend Biden, but I think he deserves credit for pulling out. Regardless of the media, the military, and plenty of other opposition, his speeches can be picked apart, but the actions are what matters. No, I agree.
I agree, too.
Jeff from Atlanta.
I mean, I don't agree.
Whatever. That was good. Whatever errors the Biden administration has made with the withdrawal, it's a 3rd or 4th order issue. Of course, our media will focus on the last 2 days instead of the last 20 years. So much easier. Why would we focus on the drunk driver that caused the fatal accident when we can focus on a shitty job the body shop did with the repairing the fender? It's maddening. I think your basic point is true, but I do think that you don't want to minimize the fact that we should take responsibility at the very least for what we've done there. And part of that is not just leaving. Part of that is welcoming into this country tens of thousands of refugees. I mean,
what happens moving forward?
Well, that should have happened 5 months ago.
And that's the lesson. I mean, if anything, Biden, who separated himself from Clinton's foreign policy, he had a completely different vision post-Iraq because of this. This was his entire like this is what he stood on was, okay, we broke it. Now what do we do with it? And Clinton and this advised the Libya strategy. To me, it just seems like it's Ben Rhodes is doing exactly what he did in Libya. Break it, go run away.
Yep. Disco Stew, it sure seems like everyone just forgot about the Muslim ban. Laughable for any conservative feigned concern for the Afghan people after supporting a ban that would have kept them out of the U.S. anyways. Rand Paul's neighbor, Gummy Bear Tree, where can I get mine, Emma? And two more. Watiu, happy birthday to my studio mate, Fraggin Nard. And the final I am of the day. Seder's half-chewed steak. The thought of doorknobs creating sock puppet accounts to hate watching TMR to drag Emma is pretty funny, actually. Matt, Nomi, Bradley, Emma, great job today. We will see you tomorrow.
Bye.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth